Hey gamers, and welcome to this exclusive True Colours Q&A session with me, Borealis. I've collected all your burning questions about the development, plot, characters, and all sorts of things to do with this crazy little visual novel I've created, and now I'm gonna spill the tea. Question 1. Very general question, but what issues or difficulties did you overcome making it? We like a general question, and the development process is always, and I mean always, full of difficulties, both expected and unexpected, so good question. The main struggle I had, and I kind of anticipated this, was the task of writing a story that wasn't just, you're a bad guy, you do bad things, oh my god, this is horrible, people die, the end. I've had some True Colours players mention that they find the protagonist somewhat uncomfortable to play as because of the things that they do in the first half of the game, and I get it, you're the villain, it's the premise of the game, and it would have been awful if I'd just made a game where you walk around manipulating and abusing people and that's it. But of course, that was never my intention. The whole thing with True Colours is that I wanted it to be the story of a really toxic person who actually realises what they're doing and not only takes accountability for it, but also strives to become a better person. That's what True Colours is really about. So the difficulty with writing the story was that I wanted the terrible villain part of the game to feel worth going through to get to the heartwarming redemption arc in the second half. Of course, there are plenty of choices that lead to bad endings where you never see that redemption come to fruition, but when you reach those good endings, you see a person who's genuinely gone through hell, become mentally warped from it, done a lot of bad things, and then caught themselves and turned their whole life around to become someone who people love and trust again. And I really hope people get some satisfaction from that. Of course, there is entertainment value in the villain part, but you know me, I love a big slushy character development arc that ends with something positive that tugs on your heartstrings, and that's what it's really about. So after all that yapping, to answer your question, it was a real piece of work to make sure that the story I wrote was morally balanced, enjoyable to experience, and also realistic. I hope I did a good job, I guess time will tell. Question 2. What inspired you to write True Colours? Well, some of you followers may remember that a couple of years ago when I was gearing up to start brainstorming some ideas for a second game, I put out a questionnaire that basically gave you guys a chance to share your opinions on what you thought I should do next, because I've always valued the thoughts of anyone who's lovely enough to play my games and get involved. So I asked a bunch of questions like, would you like a Venus sequel or something new? What kind of genre would you like? Is there anything that you haven't really seen before in a visual novel that you'd like to see? And the main answers that kept cropping up were that romance and mystery/horror were the most wanted genres. And there were a couple of mentions of the possibility of seeing things from the perspective of a bad guy and exploring that whole moral thing. And that kind of set something off in my head like, okay, we could make the protagonist a bad guy and maybe explore different versions of the story based on whether the player keeps making toxic decisions or whether they try to bring the protagonist out of that toxicity and mould them into something better. And of course, with romance being a popular element, I then got the idea to make the game kind of feel like your average dating sim at the start, until shit hits the fan and the truth is revealed. And then the player has this tumultuous connection with a love interest which has an influence on how they make their decisions going forward. And there's a theme of, can I save the relationship? Those concepts really interested me, and that's basically what I was thinking about as I started coming up with the story, so there you go. Question 3. Which character was the easiest to write and which was the most difficult? I feel like this is going to sound incredibly backwards, but I actually think the protagonist was the easiest to write. They're a very complicated person and they go through a lot of personal changes, but I think my interests and my own experiences of life actually help them to come together quite easily, honestly. I've had my own mental health struggles and I've also known many people with them too. And aside from personal stuff, I've also had a long-standing interest in true crime. I've read a lot about serial killers and stuff like that. It's very fascinating, in a totally horrible way, of course, how a person's mental state could influence them to actually go through with acts that are such a violation of humanity. It's very interesting psychologically. Maybe that's my calling after all. Might have taken the wrong job. But anyway, I have a lot of that kind of knowledge in my brain. So when I was writing the protagonist, I kind of drew on a lot of the things that I've read about real life criminals and my own personal experiences about things like trauma, depression, etc. And it actually made it very easy. The hardest person to write, I'm tempted to say Malik on that one, simply for the reason, and I'm not going to say everything here because this is a big spoiler, But something happens with Malik before the protagonist meets him that could paint him in an unfavourable light. But of course, Malik is a good guy in the context of True Colours, so I needed to make sure that what Malik had been involved in previously didn't fully taint him as a character. He went through something and made a bad decision, and he totally owned up to it and has been a wonderful dude ever since. But he has that slight shadow hanging over him, and I had to be careful to make sure that the balance was right and that players didn't see him too much for the person he was when he made that one bad decision. If you don't know Malik's secret, by the way, you might be very surprised when you find it. It has a big impact on how the protagonist views their own mistakes and potential improvement. It's a wild reveal. Question 4. How different was the process of making this game compared to your previous game, Venus Improbable Dream? Writing-wise, incredibly different, because obviously it's just such a different kind of story. Development-wise, it had a lot of similarities, but of course, True Colours is my second game, so it automatically had an advantage because I'd already learnt a lot from making Venus. I was able to speed up some of the development process due to the fact that, thanks to Venus, I already knew how to do certain things, and I'd already riddled out how to troubleshoot certain technical issues with the game engine and coding, etc. That was a real help, and because the process was smoother overall, I then had the time and the patience to start to learn to incorporate more advanced things that Venus didn't have, which makes True Colours, at least to me, feel more professional and enjoyable. I also worked with more people on this one. It's still a Borealis game and no actual team was assembled around me, but I worked with a couple more individuals that helped to just bring so much to the game. The artwork was awesome, and we have voice actors, and those elements are another thing that I think really puts True Colours just a little step up from Venus as an experience. I'm especially fond of the voice acting. Partial voice acting is my favourite, and it just gave all of the characters so much more life. And also, my own kind of mental focus felt very different with True Colours. As you'll know, Venus Improbable Dream was my first game and also took years and years to create because it was originally just a personal project. It was never meant to go public, but then it gradually morphed into what it became. So I had no deadlines with it and absolutely no direction or previous experience to guide the development process. It was unbelievably homebrew and disorganised. But True Colours was an intentional project right from the start, with a framework around it, with deadlines, the complete opposite really. So I felt a lot more focused making this game, and I really hope that the work I put in has truly delivered a great product that you guys really enjoy playing. And that's about it for this Q&A session. I hope it gave you a deeper insight into True Colours, and if you were on the fence about buying the game, maybe it might just tip you over that fence into Camp Yes. Maybe? Go on, you won't regret it.